Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a great start to this week, a great start to the month of March. This is going to be a book tag video for Tag Tuesday, the spoiler tag, the extraordinary original tag created by Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and a worthy successor to their great and very fun tag from 2020. If I was tagged by anybody, I apologize that I missed it. I had a very busy week last week as we were transitioning to in-person learning, for most of our students. So here we go. Prompt 1. What do you consider a spoiler? Well, Brian at Books had a great response where he talked about it. It's really anything that is not common or general knowledge that is going to affect somebody's enjoyment of a particular work, whether that's, plot or twists or character twists. And I agree with that. What is common and general knowledge in the age of the internet, particularly in the age not just of adaptations but of memes, which can be spoilers to a certain degree. That raises this question of like, how do you avoid spoilers more and more? But prompt 2, does the genre you're reading impact what you consider to be a spoiler? And I'll probably have a longer response to this and kind of like then, blast through the later prompts. But if you're Aristotle in the Poetics, then absolutely, he puts plot as number 1 on his list of like the great qualities of a dramatic work. And so if plot is the only thing you're reading for, then yes, spoilers are critical. You have certain writers, and I don't necessarily agree with that, as we'll see in the rest of these volumes I produce, but you have certain writers whose works primarily hinge on a twist. And I would include O. Henry famously in that, a number of the works of Guy de Maupassant, The Necklace, for example. And then you have works, including by Guy de Maupassant, like his short story, The Jewels, where there's a twist, but the twist is earlier in the story, and then we see what happens after that twist. So the twist isn't the final line in the last page, and it's like there to like get you at the end. At best, those works that only exist for a twist, I guess you could read them twice. Once to like read it, and then once to read it and sort of pick up the pebbles that are left along the way to the twist, as Hansel and Gretel would do. But you have those types of works. I think a lot of times people think of crime fiction as works that hinge on a twist or on an answer, a solution to the mystery. But some of my favorite crime fiction, the spoilers are irrelevant. In The Cold Succession by James Ellroy, the book starts on November 22nd, 1963. If you're in the U.S., that's a date a lot of people recognize, and a 3-letter, set of initials that are important on that date, and it ends in the first week of June in 1968. So if you're aware of U.S. history, you know what this book is like bookended by. You know the historical events, but it's the time, it's the evocation of that time. It is the the characters and how they change and the sacrifices or the choices that they make. Sometimes we think of sacrifice as sacrificing a good sacrifice is a good thing, but sometimes if people sacrifice their integrity and their humanity, then that's a bad thing. James Crumley's Dancing Bear. I've reread both of these mysteries. I know the plot details, but I enjoy how they're written. I enjoy the characterization. Works like Shadow Country by Peter Matheson. The book is essentially like it's elliptical. The book is spoiled in the first chapter. The first entry tells us what happens to E.J. Watson. The final section, the final third of the book is just his mind and his personality throughout his life, ending with what happens in the first chapter of this book. So this is an enormous, mammoth of a book, and it's wonderfully written. It's a fascinating book to delve into, even if you know the ending. You have, other fictional works like Toni Morrison sort of spoils The Bluest Eye if you can read through the lines in what's almost a prologue to the start of the plot of the novel. I don't know that anybody reads Virginia Woolf for plot. It's the language, it's what they're trying to conjure up with language, what they're trying to do with language that is so interesting. It's kind of like people will go to see a live band, not just to hear their favorite songs, but to see the band try something new and something interesting and innovative in that moment. And Morrison and Woolf are the writers who do things like that with the language in their books. The plot is almost irrelevant. And then you have genres like nonfiction. Byzantium, The Decline and Fall. I wonder what happens. I'm really curious. And so with nonfiction, again, it's very hard to think of nonfiction as being spoiled. That often we learn the spoiler of history by reading nonfiction, but to a certain degree, much of nonfiction, we know the endings. It's what else is going on? What are all the details? How do we fill out that world? That's why we read it. You have drama. So this was one I was thinking about. Drama, I think sometimes we think of it as the plot is so integral, similar to, you know, its descendants, television and films, where the plot is so important and many of us are watching it for the story. But that's not always the case. And someone like Euripides, not even in like modern avant-garde drama or non-linear works, but someone like Euripides, writing 2,500 years ago, would spoil his plays in the very beginning. In the opening course, he spoils the play, sort of to make the point of like, the plot's not important. Look at the language. Look at what the character's doing. How their interplay is occurring. That's what's important. And of course, there are, you know, genres like poetry. Can poetry really be spoiled? My wife and I had this discussion. I don't think it can be. Neither of us really felt that it could be. Someone like John Milton might try. Every argument at the beginning of each of the books of Paradise Lost, you know, tells you the plot details. That's not what spoils Paradise Lost. The middle books, it's the language. So those are ones. But another one that I don't think I heard anybody talk about, and this is one that's a little bit more open-ended. I'm not going to make a referee judgment call on this one. This is more just one that I hadn't heard anybody talk about. But if you're a spiritual person, you believe in, you know, in the concept of prophecy, do prophecies act as spoilers in a spiritual text or in a sacred text? You know, throughout both the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament and the Greek New Testament, there are prophecies that are made, and again, within the Quran, there are statements that we could, you know, a believer could construe as prophecy. And so do we regard prophecies within sacred texts as spoilers? Like, that's one I would be curious, you know, what other people think about that, believer or non-believer. So again, I said that was going to be a long response, so there we go. Prompt 3, all the best bits are in the trailer. Sometimes the synopsis can be too detailed. Do you research books prior to reading them, or do you go in blind? I think you get to a certain point where you've read a number of works that make references or homages to or allusions to other works, and so you start to sort of pull those in. Again, with nonfiction, you kind of just know a lot of the main brushstrokes. What I read it, you know, nonfiction for, at least, is for the details, for the characterization. That's what I'm reading Parting the Waters by Taylor Branch for this month in March. I will say that if I'm reading something about a work, I've sort of end reading crime novels and other works where the plot is really important. I really try to focus and not let my eyes wander. I don't know if anybody else has jumpy eyes when reading books and likes to sort of like drift down and drift over to the next page and just kind of scan a line, like, oh, who's talking on the next page? Oh, what's... And I find that that habit tends to happen with an increasing frequency as one progresses deeper into the work. And the spoilers potentially are more likely to be there. The twists, I should say, are more likely to be there. So I really try to like focus my eyes and only read one line at a time, one sentence at a time, and not drift down and scan the text at all. And I'll do that with a review or something, so that I'm really careful trying not to spoil anything for myself. Prompt 4. Sometimes the introduction or translator's notes can spoil the ending, especially for classics. Has this ever happened to you? I regard the introduction to any book as a mistitled or mislabeled afterword. That said, sometimes you have works like this is a marvelous translation. There's great notes in the Penguin Classics version of Ovid's Metamorphoses. As with the works, in this case, the spoilers are broken up by books, so every book begins with a 2-page summary of everything that's going to happen. And I think I read like 1 or 2 and then realized what they were and just stopped. But this is an example of that. It's like embedded in the text practically. Prompt 5. Name a time somebody spoiled a novel for you. I couldn't think of one, and I've been reading for a long time, and I appreciate all of my family and friends who have never spoiled anything for me. Prompt 6. Have you ever spoiled a novel for somebody else? Infamously, I spoiled Lonesome Dove, which, again, it had been a mini-series for about 15 years at this point. So did I really spoil it? I don't know. I do know that I was, making a witty banter at the opening of our hall, our dorm at college, my sophomore year of college, and I was, making some witty banter, trying to impress a young woman I was, intrigued by, and I thought I was being really cool when I was talking about Lonesome Dove, and she was reading Lonesome Dove as we're sitting there, like, meeting all the freshmen and greeting them and helping them move in and stuff, and we're sitting there talking about Lonesome Dove, and she had mentioned where she was at in the book, and she was almost to the end, and I proceeded to divulge that there was going to be a twist involving a certain character, and then there was a 30-page denouement after that. I thought she had reached that point, and she hadn't. Needless to say, I was the Lonesome Dove that week. Prompt 7, if spoilers ruin novels, are there some authors or genres you can't reread? Only the works that specifically exist for that single twist. O. Henry's stories come to mind. And that might just be because I'm an inveterate rereader of children's books at this point in my life. So with the company I keep. Prompt 8, when reviewing, are you spoiler free? Does this limit your ability to discuss? I think I try to focus more on like specific events or themes or symbols in the discussions I do. I always like to try and read an example of what the work reads like so that people can tell if that's something they'd be interested in reading. But I try to avoid spoilers unless there's like this big deep dive where it's like a work I love and I just want to drill down into it really far. And if I can remember to, I'll usually say, this is the point at which spoilers will begin. Stop listening. I try to save, my spoilers for like Vox or discussions like that in private more frequently. Prompt 9, shout out 5 channels you enjoy. I don't believe any of these 5 have done this, so I'm going to shout them out and say why I like them. So Jordan Parsons has his new-ish channel going. It's fantastic, and I'd be curious on his thoughts on whether or not poetry can be spoiled. Bill Rutenberg is, of course, always amazing, a fellow educator, and I'd be curious on whether or not he thinks nonfiction can be spoiled. Janae over at Coffee and Copyrights, she's I think a new-ish channel. And has a great sense of like energy and authenticity. So I'd be curious on her thoughts. Summer at Cozy Reading with Quaker Cats, somehow like I don't know if she was not tagged, but I'd be curious to know what she thinks. I saw she put up 20 of her favorite books, a list, and so were they spoiled? I will say that no one, going back to prompt 5, nobody was able to spoil A Song of Ice and Fire for me because I did read that in the mid-2000s, so I was thankful to be ahead of that one. And then Michael K. Vaughan, he's just been going, again, a newish channel, and he reads a lot of science fiction and fantasy, so I'd be curious if he thinks those genres sort of can be spoiled. That was a bone of contention on some videos last weekend. So this is the spoiler tag. I hope it did not spoil your week, but rather edified it. Thanks, everybody.